I never thought my life would turn into a twisted plot from a bad movie. My name is Mark, and I'm just your average guy living in a suburban town with my wife, Jessica. We've been married for about 7 years now, and on the surface, everything seemed fine. We had a decent house, a couple of dogs, and a pretty stable routine, until the cracks started to show. Looking back, I can pinpoint the moment things began to unravel. It was subtle at first. Jess started working late more often, claiming that the demands of her job had increased. At first, I believed her. I mean, it sounded reasonable, right? But then came the little things. Her phone seemed glued to her hand, and whenever I walked into the room, she would quickly close an app or put it face down on the table. I chalked those changes up to her being busy, not suspicious at all, right? But then, the gut feeling kicked in. One night after a long day at work, I decided to surprise her by cooking dinner. I had her favorite meal ready, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. As I set the table, I noticed her phone on the counter. It buzzed, lighting up with an incoming message. My curiosity got the best of me, and I picked it up. The name Ryan popped up on the screen, and my heart sank. I didn't know who Ryan was, but Jess's reaction when I asked about him was enough to raise a red flag. She laughed it off, claiming he was just a coworker. Still, something about her laughter felt forced, like she was trying too hard to convince me. I started to pay closer attention, and that's when I really began to notice changes. Jess would come home late, smelling like cheap perfume, which was odd because she always wore the same signature scent. The excuses flowed: meetings, late-night work sessions, and even charity events. My trust was eroding, but I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that everything was fine, but the signs were too glaring to ignore. Then came the moment of discovery that shattered my world. It was a Saturday night, and I was lounging on the couch watching TV when Jess's phone buzzed again. This time, I decided to take a peek. I scrolled through her messages and my heart dropped. Their conversations were flirtatious and intimate, everything a husband would dread seeing. I felt like I had been punched in the gut and I couldn't breathe. It didn't just hurt, it felt like betrayal carved into my chest. I confronted Jess that night. She came home late after another supposed work event, and I was waiting in the living room. The moment she walked in, I knew I had to say something. I told her I had seen the messages, and my voice wavered as I spoke. Her reaction was nothing short of horrifying. Instead of remorse, I was met with anger and denial. "You're being paranoid, Mark. You're reading too much into this. Ryan is just a friend, I swear." The bitterness in her tone cut deep, and the lies poured out of her like water from a broken dam. I felt so many emotions swirling inside me: anger, sadness, confusion. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, was lying to my face. I could see the disconnect in her eyes, the way she deflected responsibility, as if I were the one in the wrong for asking questions. The confrontation spiraled into a shouting match with her, insisting that I was overreacting and that I should trust her. The emotional impact of that moment was devastating. I went from shock to a bubbling rage, and then to a profound sadness. I felt like a fool for having trusted her, for believing in our marriage. It was as if the love I thought we had was tainted by her betrayal. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on our couch, replaying every moment of our relationship in my mind. Now I faced a decision. What was I going to do? Fight for a marriage that felt so broken, or walk away from someone I thought was my partner for life? My heart was heavy with the weight of betrayal, and I knew I had to figure out my next steps carefully. The love I felt for Jess was still there, but the trust was shattered, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. In the days that followed, I took time to reflect. I realized that I had to confront not only Jess, but also my feelings. I needed to decide what I wanted, whether to fight for my marriage or to reclaim my life. I was at a crossroads, and whichever path I chose was going to alter my life forever. The days following that fateful confrontation felt like an eternity. I was stuck in a limbo of disbelief and sorrow, wrestling with the reality that my wife had betrayed me. Jess went about her business as if nothing had happened, but I could see the tension in her shoulders whenever I entered the room. It was as if I were living in a strange house, haunted by the specter of our crumbling marriage. I spent my days at work trying to focus, but every little thing reminded me of Jess and the lies. I'd see couples laughing together during lunch, and my stomach would twist with resentment. I was angry at Jess, at Ryan, but mostly at myself for letting it come this far. I had always believed that love and trust were the foundations of a strong marriage, but now those foundations felt like they were sinking into quicksand. I decided to confide in my best friend, Tom. He had been with me through thick and thin, and I knew he would give it to me straight. We met up at a bar after work, and I poured my heart out over a few drinks. As I relayed the details of Jess's late nights and the messages I uncovered, I watched Tom's face morph from concern to disbelief. "Dude, you need to confront her again. This isn't just a misunderstanding. She's cheating, plain and simple." His words felt like a cold splash of reality. I knew deep down that he was right. I couldn't let this slide. I had to take action, but what kind? Part of me wanted to scream and shout to expose her lies for everyone to see, but another part was terrified at the thought of losing her altogether. I had spent years building a life with Jess, and abandoning it felt like walking away from a part of myself. After a couple of drinks to wash down the anxiety, I made up my mind. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I needed a plan. Though it was hard for me to admit, I wanted revenge, not just for the betrayal, but to regain some sense of control over my life. I started thinking about how I could confront Jess again, but this time with undeniable evidence. I needed to catch her in the act. Over the next few days, I turned into a shadow, covertly observing her every move. I started working from home occasionally, waiting for the perfect moment to catch her slipping. I knew her routine all too well, her late nights, her usual excuses, and her apparent disregard for our partnership. I began to think of ways to see if she would slip up. One fateful evening, I decided to follow her. It felt like a betrayal of its own, but I was desperate for the truth. I waited until she left for another meeting, and I hopped in my car, following her from a distance. My heart raced as I drove through familiar streets, praying she wouldn't notice me. She ended up at a bar on the edge of town, a place we had never gone to together. My gut twisted. I parked a few blocks away and watched. At first, it was just her sitting alone, glancing at her phone. But then my worst fears came true. I saw Ryan walk in, and they exchanged hugs that felt far too intimate. I felt sick to my stomach. My hands trembled. As I watched them slide into a booth at the back, their heads closed together, engaged in hushed conversation. I fumed silently as I watched their interaction. I couldn't hear their words, but their expressions told me everything I needed to know. They were laughing, whispering, and leaning into each other's personal space. I felt rage boiling inside me, the kind that made me want to storm in there and confront them both right then and there. But I held back, knowing that I needed to gather more evidence before I made any moves. After an hour, Jess stood up to go to the bathroom. My heart raced, and the impulse to follow her was almost unbearable. Instead, I decided to stay put and wait for her to come back. When she returned, she looked different, her cheeks flushed, her hair slightly disheveled. I watched as she slid back into the booth with a big smile. Ryan leaned in closer, and that's when I saw it. He reached over and gently caressed her arm, a gesture so familiar yet so wrong. I felt a surge of anger so intense it made my heart race. I was no longer just a husband being cheated on. I was a man who had to reclaim his dignity. As the night wore on, I continued to watch them, my heart heavy with betrayal but my mind racing with thoughts of how I would confront her. After witnessing enough, I finally decided it was time to leave. I couldn't bear to watch anymore. I drove home in a daze, replaying everything in my mind. Jess had betrayed our marriage, and now I had the ammunition I needed to confront her again, this time with undeniable proof. When I walked through the door, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I was determined to put an end to the charade and reclaim my life, but I also felt a twinge of sadness for what we had lost. Jess was still my wife, and part of me mourned the love we once shared, even if it was now buried under lies and deceit. In that moment, I knew that the next confrontation would change everything. I just had to find the right words to say and the strength to follow through. The night after my clandestine observation, sleep evaded me. I tossed and turned, replaying every moment from my surveillance in my mind. The image of Jess laughing with Ryan haunted me, gnawing at my insides like a relentless pest. Part of me wanted to curl up and forget everything, wishing I could erase the betrayal from existence. But I knew that was impossible. I had gathered enough evidence to confront her. This time, there would be no room for lies. The next evening, I decided to approach her when she got home. I waited in the living room, the ambience muted by the weight of anticipation. When Jess walked through the door, she was her usual self, all smiles and sweet hellos, but I could barely muster a response. I felt like I was on the verge of a breaking point, ready to unleash everything I had bottled up inside. "Mark, what's wrong? You look tense," she said, tilting her head slightly as she set her bag down by the door. I could see the innocence in her eyes, and for a fleeting moment I felt a pang of regret for what I was about to do. But when I remembered her laughter with Ryan, the moment passed like a wisp of smoke. "Jess, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of tension. The air shifted immediately and I could see her smile falter. "I know about Ryan." Her face went white and the confidence she usually exuded crumbled. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The facade of innocence was slipping and I could see panic rising in her eyes. "I saw you both at that bar," I continued, my heart pounding in my chest. "The way you were with him, laughing, touching. It was more than just friends, Jess. You can't deny it." For a moment she stood there, frozen, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a response. "You're just misinterpreting everything. We were just what?" I interrupted, my anger boiling over. "Just friends, is that what you're going to tell me? Because it sure didn't look that way to me." I pulled out my phone and showed her the messages I had saved, the flirtations woven throughout their conversations. "This is not just a friendship, Jess. This is betrayal." She snatched the phone from my hand, scanning the screen with wide eyes. When she looked back up at me, there was a mixture of fear and defiance in her gaze. "You don't understand. Things have been complicated between us. I didn't want to hurt you, Mark." "Complicated?" I echoed incredulously. "So you thought sneaking around behind my back was the solution? What was I supposed to think, Jess? That everything was fine while you were out with him?" Her defenses crumbled and she sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. "I know I messed up. I was lonely and I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I thought maybe if I found someone else it would help fill the void." The words cut deeper than a knife. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I held back. "So you thought cheating was the answer? That's your excuse?" Jess looked down, her voice small as she whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." "Yet here we are," I said, my voice cold. "The trust is gone, Jess. You've shattered everything we built together." I could see the tears pooling in her eyes, but part of me felt no sympathy. She had made her choices. I was angry at her, but I was also angry at myself for not seeing the signs sooner, for not confronting her when the doubts first crept in. I had been so desperate to hold on to the perception of our marriage that I ignored the reality of our crumbling foundation. "What do you want me to say?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I can't change what happened. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this," I shot back. "You've betrayed me, Jess. The question is, can we move past this? Can we even move forward with our marriage after everything?" She looked up, her eyes pleading for forgiveness, but I wasn't ready to give her one. "I need time to think," I said, my voice flat. "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I can't make any decisions right now. I just need some space." I walked out of the room, feeling emptiness wrap around me like a thick fog. I had confronted her, but I hadn't found any resolution. I was still lost amidst the chaos of betrayal and heartbreak. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in our house was suffocating. We tiptoed around each other, the silence palpable. I felt like I was sharing a home with a stranger. Jess would try to initiate conversations, her eyes filled with hope, but every time she opened her mouth, I felt the anger bubbling to the surface again. I wanted to scream at her, to let her know how hurt I was, but all I could manage was silence. Every time she reached out, I pulled away. I didn't want to play the role of the understanding husband who would forgive and forget. I was still raw, still processing everything. I spent my evenings at the gym, running until my legs burned, trying to channel my anger into something productive. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the reality of my situation. I was still married to a woman who had betrayed me, and I had to decide what my next steps would be. Jess deserved a response, but I didn't know what I could give her. My heart was conflicted. Could love and trust be rebuilt from the ashes of this betrayal, or was this the end of our story? The uncertainty loomed over me like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over everything I once held dear. As the days turned into weeks, the silence in our home became deafening. Jess tried to reach out, but I felt like a wall had been erected between us, one that I wasn't sure could ever come down. It was impossible for me to forget the betrayal, and every attempt at conversation felt like she was trying to breach a fortress that I had built around my heart. I needed time, but more than that, I needed clarity. One evening, after yet another round of awkward small talk, I decided to take a walk. I needed space to think, a break from the tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. The cool night air felt refreshing against my skin as I strolled through the neighborhood, the rhythmic sound of my footsteps echoing in the stillness. It was during these walks that I realized how deeply I was hurting. I remembered the early days of our relationship, the laughter, the inside jokes, the connection we once shared. It was a stark contrast to the emptiness I felt now. I missed Jess, the woman who had been my partner, my confidant, but I also felt a surge of anger. How could she have jeopardized everything we had built together? As I walked, I found myself contemplating the future. Could I ever trust her again? Did I even want to? The thought of starting over felt like scaling a mountain, and the prospect was both daunting and exhausting. But as I passed a park, I saw a couple sitting on a bench, laughing together, and for a moment I felt an ache in my chest. I longed for that connection again, but it felt so far out of reach. When I returned home, Jess was waiting for me in the living room, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Where did you go?" she asked, her voice tentative. "I needed some air," I replied, feeling the tension return. "I've been thinking a lot." She nodded, her expression turning serious. "I want to talk about everything, Mark. I know I messed up, but I want to fix this. I want to earn back your trust." I studied her face, searching for sincerity in her eyes. "Do you really think we can fix this?" I asked, my voice heavy with doubt. "You broke our trust, Jess. It's not just about saying you're sorry, it's about what happens next." "I know," she said, her voice cracking. "I've been talking to someone, my therapist, and I realize how much I took for granted. I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't want to lose you." The mention of therapy struck me as a step in the right direction, but I was still skeptical. "And what do you think therapy is going to accomplish? You think some sessions are going to magically erase what you did?" I felt anger bubbling up again, but I pushed it down, determined not to let the conversation devolve into another fight. "No, I know it won't," she admitted. "But I want to understand why I made those choices. I want to be better for myself and for us. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you that I can change." I sighed, torn between the anger I felt and the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could salvage something from this wreckage. "It's going to take time, Jess. You can't expect me to just forgive you overnight." "I understand," she said softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm willing to wait. I just want the chance to make things right." It was a small step, but it felt like a turning point. Could I see her effort? Could I allow myself to believe that she was genuine in her desire to change? I nodded slowly, still hesitant. "Let's take it one day at a time. We can start by being honest with each other. No more lies." She nodded emphatically, relief washing over her cheeks. "I promise. No more secrets." The sincerity in her voice was tangible, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of the connection we once had. As the days turned into a week, we began to navigate our new reality. We went to therapy together, and although it was uncomfortable at first, I found myself opening up about my feelings of betrayal, loneliness, and anger. Jess did the same, though I sensed the weight of her guilt pressing down on her. Each session was raw and emotional, filled with tears and tough conversations, but it felt like we were reestablishing a foundation built on honesty and understanding. But no matter how hard we tried, the shadows of the past lingered. There were nights when Jess would reach out for me, and I would pull away, reminded of the pain she had caused. On other nights, I would find her in tears, overwhelmed by the burden of her guilt. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but the words felt stuck in my throat. I began to realize that healing was not a straight path. It was a winding road filled with ups and downs, moments of clarity and moments of doubt. I had to confront my feelings, not just about Jess, but about myself. I felt lost, unsure of the kind of man I wanted to be moving forward. Could I trust again? Would I ever be able to see Jess without the shadow of betrayal looming over her? And then there were moments of joy, small victories that reminded me of the love we once shared. We would share laughs, reminisce about the good times, and I would catch glimpses of the woman I fell in love with all those years ago. It was confusing, this mix of emotions, and I felt as if I were walking a tightrope. One misstep could shatter the fragile trust we were trying to rebuild. As we continued through therapy, I started to see a glimmer of hope, but in the back of my mind, I knew that this journey would not be easy. It was a long road to forgiveness, and I had to decide if I was willing to walk it. Could I let go of the past and believe in a future with Jess, or was it time to move on and reclaim my own life? With each passing day, I knew I was inching closer to a decision that would shape the rest of my life, but I had to make sure it was the right one. The echoes of betrayal still haunted me, but perhaps in the long run I could learn to forgive, not just Jess, but myself too. As time wore on, I found myself caught in this dance of healing and doubt. Each therapy session brought a mix of progress and regression. Jess was earnest in her attempts to reclaim my trust, but the weight of her betrayal still lingered like a shadow, and I often felt like I was grappling with my own demons. We began to establish a new routine, one that included not just therapy but also open dialogues about our feelings. At first, the conversations felt awkward and strained, often filled with hesitations and stumbles. But little by little, we learned to communicate honestly. It was almost as if we were peeling back layers of ourselves that had grown thick with resentment, hurt, and misunderstanding over the years. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, we sat on the couch facing each other. Jess had shared a lot about her feelings of loneliness during the time she had the affair, and it had left me reeling. I couldn't help but draw parallels between her emotional state and my own struggles. I had felt isolated as well, buried under the weight of work and responsibilities. "Do you think we were both lost?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I was surprised by the vulnerability that had crept into my tone. This was an important moment, and I wanted to approach it delicately. "I think we both got caught up in our own lives and forgot to check in with each other," she replied, her eyes searching mine for understanding. I thought I could fill the gaps with attention from someone else, and it turned out to be the worst decision of my life. Her honesty struck a chord within me. I realized that we had both made choices that led us to this painful point, albeit in very different ways. We had both taken each other for granted, and it had driven a wedge between us. I nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "Maybe we can learn from this," I said. "Maybe we can find a way to reconnect and support each other better." "I want that more than anything," Jess said, her voice thick with emotion. "I want us to be a team again. I don't want to be that person who hurt you." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but it didn't erase the scars of our journey. I noticed that she was working to change. She was committed to understanding herself better and to being transparent with me. As the weeks passed, I began to feel some shifts within myself too. I was learning to let go of the anger that had consumed me, but it was a fragile balance, one that could crumble with a single misstep. One weekend, we decided to take a short trip together, hoping to rekindle some of the joy we once shared. We packed our bags and drove to a nearby cabin in the woods, just the two of us. The surroundings were beautiful, with tall trees and a serene lake that mirrored the sky. I hoped the landscape would provide a fresh perspective, a reset for our marriage. As we settled into the cabin, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. We spent the days hiking, cooking meals together, and talking late into the night by the fireplace. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of the love we shared, a connection that had felt so distant for months. Jess was engaging, joyful, and I found myself laughing again, recalling the moments that had first drawn us together. But then came the night when everything changed. As we sat on the porch, sipping wine under the stars, Jess turned to me with a serious expression. "I want to talk about what happened with Ryan," she said, her voice steady but laced with vulnerability. I felt my heart tighten. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" I asked, feeling the familiar wave of anger rising. "Yes," she replied firmly. "I think it's important for us to face it head on. I want to be completely open with you." I took a deep breath, bracing myself. "Okay." Jess began to tell me about her feelings of emptiness and how she sought validation from Ryan. She revealed moments of insecurity and how they had fed her decisions. "I thought I could find happiness elsewhere, but I only ended up hurting the person who mattered most," she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. As she spoke, I felt a mixture of emotions: anger, sadness, and a strange sense of empathy. I wanted to believe her, but the memories of her betrayal were still fresh, and the thought of her with another man sent a chill down my spine. "Jess," I said softly, "I don't know if I can ever fully understand why you made those choices. It hurts too much, but I do appreciate you being honest with me now. I want you to know that I'm committed to making this right," she pleaded. "I will do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." The sincerity in her voice struck me, and for a fleeting moment I felt the warmth of our connection reignite, but just as quickly doubt crept in. "Do you really think we can come back from this?" I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. "Can we really move forward together?" "I believe we can," she said, her voice steady. "It's not going to be easy, but we've already come so far. I want to rebuild with you, brick by brick. I just need you to meet me halfway." I felt a wave of conflict wash over me. Part of me wanted to grab onto the hope she was offering, but another part of me was still scared of getting hurt again. I was at a crossroads, and the decision before me was monumental. Maybe this journey toward forgiveness was less about forgetting the past and more about acknowledging it, while choosing to move forward. But could I truly let go, or would the shadow of her betrayal always loom over our relationship? As I sat there, staring into her eyes, I realized I had to make a choice. Did I want to fight for love, or would I walk away, reclaiming my own peace at the cost of what once was? The weight of that decision felt heavier than ever, and I knew that the next chapter of my life was waiting on the other side of this moment. The night wore on, and the stars twinkled above us like distant promises waiting to be fulfilled. Jess's gaze held mine, a mixture of hope and fear swirling in the depths of her eyes. I felt the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders, the culmination of months of pain and confusion culminating in this very moment. It was now or never. "I want to believe in us, Jess," I finally said, my heart racing. "I really do, but it's going to take time. I can't promise you anything right now, except that I'm willing to try. But you need to understand that there's no magic fix for what we've been through." "I understand," she replied, her voice soft yet filled with determination. "I'm willing to wait. I'll do the work. I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve. I want to earn back your trust piece by piece." Her words resonated with me, echoing in the quiet of the night. I thought about everything we had shared, the good and the bad, and realized that despite her betrayal, there was still a spark of something worth fighting for. I remembered the laughter, the adventures, the dreams we had built together, but I also had to acknowledge the pain and hurt that had marred our relationship. "Let's take baby steps," I suggested, feeling a flicker of hope ignite. "Let's start rebuilding our foundation and see where it leads us, but I need you to be open and honest with me every step of the way." "I promise," she said, her voice steady. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us absorbing the weight of the commitment we were making to each other. The following weeks were a mix of cautious optimism and lingering doubts. Jess continued her therapy, and I made a conscious effort to engage in our sessions too. We worked through our emotions, confronting the uncomfortable truths that had held us back for so long. Each session was a step forward, albeit sometimes a painful one, but we were making progress. I started to see changes in Jess, little things, like her being more communicative and genuinely trying to connect with me. She would leave me notes, reminding me of the good times we shared, and she made an effort to create new memories, planning small outings or cooking together. It felt awkward at times, like we were navigating uncharted waters, but slowly we began to rediscover the joy in each other's company. But there were still moments when I felt the weight of her betrayal threatening to pull me back into the darkness. I would catch a glimpse of her texting, a nagging feeling creeping in, and I had to consciously remind myself that she was trying to rebuild our trust. Each time those doubts surfaced, I confronted them, refusing to let them fester. I had to be honest with her about how I felt, about the fear and anxiety that came with rebuilding. 1. Evening, as we sat on the porch of our home, the sun setting in the distance, I turned to Jess. "I'm still scared," I admitted, my voice shaky. "I want to believe we can get through this, but I can't shake the fear that it might all fall apart again." She reached for my hand, her touch grounding. "I'm scared too, but I'm committed to this. I won't give up on us. We both messed up and I take full responsibility for my actions, but I refuse to let that define our future." As the months rolled on, I began to see the glimmers of hope turn into something tangible. The laughter that had felt so distant began to return, and our conversations grew deeper, more meaningful. I started to feel a sense of companionship returning, a connection rekindling in the space where betrayal once thrived. But I also came to realize that reclaiming trust was an ongoing process. There would be good days and bad days, moments of doubt intermingled with moments of clarity. We were learning to be patient with each other, acknowledging that healing was not linear and that setbacks were a part of the journey. I found strength in my own resilience, realizing that I could choose to confront the pain rather than run from it. The anger began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. I was learning to forgive not just Jess but myself too for allowing the situation to unfold the way it did. One day, after a particularly good weekend together, I turned to Jess, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. "I think we're going to be okay," I said, a smile creeping onto my face. Her eyes lit up and she squeezed my hand. "I believe that too," she said, her voice warm and filled with hope. "No matter what happens, I'm here for you and I want to keep working at this." In that moment, I realized that while the road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, we were committed to walking it together. We had learned from our mistakes, worked through our pain, and emerged on the other side with a deeper understanding of each other. As I reflected on the journey we had embarked upon, I felt grateful for the lessons learned. I had discovered that love could be resilient, that trust could be rebuilt, and that vulnerability could lead to healing. This experience had changed us both, but it didn't have to define us. Instead, it became a catalyst for growth, a stepping stone toward a future where we could choose to love each other with intention. And as we moved forward, I knew that the bond we were forging was stronger than any betrayal we had faced. Our story wasn't over, it was just beginning anew.